Hi everyone, my name is Beata Wilczek and this is Fashion Knowledge, a podcast educating, disrupting and shaping fashion futures. Fashion Knowledge is brought to you by Unfolding Strategies, a consultancy and education lab for digital, inclusive and sustainable fashion in Web3. Okay, I would like to welcome our special guest today. It's David Cash, the CEO and founder of Cash Labs, which is, as he said just a second before, his baby. So yeah, he runs Cash Labs, an NFT and blockchain consultancy, which stands up his previous and extensive experience in media production and his interesting master thesis that he did at Polymoda, all about NFTs. Maybe David will tell us a little bit more about it too, because as you know, I'm very interested in education. He is also the editor-in-chief of NFTs What the Fuck, contributor to Vogue Singapore, and officially a curator of Decentraland, which I would like us to talk a bit more about. Welcome, David.
Thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you too. We actually met as I was one of the speakers on one of the panels during the Metaverse Fashion Week, and it was a very interesting conversation. So I think it would be great, now to reverse the situation, and now I'll be the one asking you a question. So maybe let's start from curating. What does it mean to curate digital fashion? How does it work?
I mean, I think that the role of a curator has definitely changed as we've moved into the digital realm. I mean, for a long time, we've always kind of had the conundrum of what art do we want to include and what art is available to be included. I mean, that's always, the conundrum of the curator. But I think in the digital realm, that even happens on maybe a larger case, if that makes any sense, just because, some digital artworks, while yes, massive paintings and sculptures do take very long, periods of times to create, same with, pieces of haute couture, but virtual garments as well do take a ton of man hours to produce, and also, facilities to render them. So I think a lot of people are hesitant to create work if they don't have a clear, kind of financial component to it. So I think that's like one of the number one challenges in curating digital work. For the most part, it has to be existing work, or if it's work that's being created, there has to be a purpose, or it has to be some kind of a financial component. Yeah, incentive, exactly. And I think that poses an interesting challenge, but at the same time, I think it results in the curator. I think it results in the curator playing more of a role of somebody who empowers artists and works with artists, and keeps in touch with them throughout their careers. The reason I'm able to kind of curate on an ongoing basis, especially in the metaverse, is because I have relationships with many of the people who create in this realm. I work with them outside of the realm of curating them, and I have an awareness of what they're doing and what their current practices are. So it's easier for me to be like, okay, these things make sense, or these things line up, and then put those in a gallery context or in a fashion show context, depending on what we're talking about.
It's interesting, but very often when we think about curating, for me, it's about like thinking, what's the audience, what story we're trying to tell, in what space is happening, and how it all resonate together. And when we think about narratives and Web3, there's a lot of conversation, about inclusion, making those who couldn't participate before, for example, in fashion, to open up to them. So do you think that, curating digital fashion as you are practicing it now, as you're doing it now, is it also open to telling all those other stories, or this is still quite early on? Like, can we even make those kind of claims that digital fashion is embracing plurality and is inclusive and diverse in that context?
I like to think so. I mean, one thing I've talked about a lot this month, over the past month, being Pride Month in various panels in Decentraland and otherwise, is the idea of how we bring our identities into the metaverse. And I do think it's really important. For me, maybe it's just inherent, and I almost don't even think about it because, I am a storyteller. I am somebody who loves perpetuating narratives. I write, I've created films, I've created art. I love perpetuating narratives, and I do that in pretty much everything I do, and definitely through curating. And also at the same time, I've personally, at least when I think about my personal narratives, I've worked for LGBTQ plus organizations for many years. I've always kind of had an activist part of what I do. So I almost don't think about it. It's almost just inherent to my work. But to your point, I think absolutely. I think it's important to include activism activism and even just making statements within curation, because otherwise, what's the point? I think that every show should have some kind of a crux or some kind of a value proposition on the people who are attending it. I always like to think, in a very I guess contemporary media type way, maybe also in a very Web3 type way, in terms of what value are we providing anytime we're putting out content or putting out producing a show, even if it's a virtual show. So yeah, I think the narrative and the necessity of tying in some kind of a backbone to the story, I think, is inherent to a lot of the curation work I do. But also at the same time, I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done. To your point, I do think that there are a lot of sites, and I don't want to I think there are a lot of sites that are doing great work. Look at what Super Rare is doing for Pride Month as well with Super Queer and Super Trans. I think that's beautiful. But, there's other platforms that just do generic kind of drops that don't really have much of a purpose or a narrative, and some of them sell, some of them don't, but I do think that a clear narrative and a clear purpose for a project or a curated drop or a gallery can only help on every level, from sales to the enjoyment of the participants. Every level.
Context is important, and definitely when it's associated with right values, it can be very, very strong. But we're talking about it now quite generally. So what are projects that we can, I don't know, your current projects or something coming in the future? You mentioned that you're working something exciting with Nick Knight and Show Studio. So how those ideas and this kind of, let's say, I don't know, a way of thinking, otherwise methodology of working, how is basically put in action?
Yeah, there's a bunch of examples I think that we're seeing. I think one thing that I'm really excited by is, the combination that we're seeing right now of physical and digital spaces. We're seeing a lot of examples of something happening IRL that also gets extended URL, you might say. And I can give a few, but also I think one thing that I'm doing a lot of right now, which I think is almost more exciting for me because we are already seeing a lot of these phygital, examples, but it's, creating interoperable metaverse experiences. So that's something I'm trying to do a lot with my gallery. It is something that we're going to do. Nick Knight has a collection dropping in July, which I'm really excited to be helping facilitate. And I believe that we're going to be doing a show in my gallery, and it's going to be, an interoperable metaverse experience. And what that means when we're talking about interoperability in the metaverse in terms of an exhibition, it's the ability to go in and out of that experience seamlessly. So, even just the simple ability, to click from a video on a wall in one metaverse and go to another website. That's inherently open. But one thing I'm even trying to push further with some exhibitions, I'm doing one actually launching in a few days. I think it'll already be out by the time this comes out. But I'm doing this also in Decentraland. We're taking over one floor of my gallery with an artist, Mike Ruiz. He has another collection for Pride called Leatherman, and we're putting 15 to 20 pieces on one floor of my gallery, and then we're adding a portal that will lead the user to Spatial, another metaverse solution, and they will actually be able to see the full 100-piece collection in Spatial because Spatial doesn't have land limits. So I think that's a really interesting use case. I think it's interesting when we start seeing gallery shows try to take things further and to the point of trying to be true to a company or an artist or a brand. Mike wanted to show all 100 pieces. The context of his collection specifically was showing these 100 pieces together, and I think the interoperability in the metaverse was a way that we could do that. So that's just one example. I think that when I did my part of my curation for Metaverse Fashion Week was also taking over this gallery. This is actually when I got the gallery from Decentraland. It was more or less a gift. Excuse me.
Can I ask you one question? For
I knew I was going to say. Sorry, thank you.
For the people who don't know what you mean when you say your gallery, and for the people who don't know when you say Decentraland and when you say my gallery in Decentraland, could you just quickly explain it? Because I think to some people tuning in it might be quite hard to comprehend.
Yeah, absolutely. So Decentraland is one of the largest metaverse solutions currently available. They have about 500,000 monthly users, and they're about 5 years old. They started initially as a VR integration, a virtual world for VR platforms. Now it's solely, an XR experience available via our laptops or computers. It's only available via desktop. That being said, there are a lot of users and there are a lot of things that happen there. Decentraland is also a foundation, and it's also a DAO. So Decentraland is a non-for-profit organization. The foundation is the company that started Decentraland, and that's who I work with. and for. And then there's the Decentraland DAO, which who are essentially the users. Decentraland is one of the earliest examples of a DAO ecosystem, or a decentralized autonomous community ecosystem, which essentially means that the community governs the ecosystem. So a lot of key components of Decentraland's framework, voting in grant proposals, adding nodes to their blockchain, all of these types of things are voted by a DAO. So I work with the Decentraland Foundation as a curator, and the first time I got to work with them hands-on directly, opposed to working with them on another project for a client, was Metaverse Fashion Week, and that's something that happened earlier this year, which was very exciting. And this was something that was initially a pipe dream that turned into a very exciting reality. It's something that I got to work with Sam, the creative director, and Giovanna, their event producer, and Shibu, their art director, and the whole team very directly on. I have to mention all their names because they did so much work on it. But yeah, one of the things that they gave me in return for curating this event and helping them produce this event was 6 plots of land. They have Decentraland is divided into various unique plots of land, which can typically be bought. Most of these are quite expensive right now, so I was definitely grateful. But they gave me 6 plots of land in the Crypto Valley district, which is one of the core districts of Decentraland, and they helped build for me a beautiful 4-store virtual art gallery, which I'm currently calling the Cash Labs Gallery. And I put on a show featuring over 20 artists, ranging from the Dematerialized and Luxo, of course, to Bautaire Paris, to trans icon Laurel Charleston, to Nick Knight and Show Studio doing a film festival on the rooftop. We had a really packed programming in that building, but then also throughout the week. So Decentraland also just kind of gave me my own framework to build off of, on top of helping them with the overall event, which was a real pleasure.
Cool. Amazing. Thank you for taking us, to Decentraland and explaining what it is. And also,
I hope people can check it out. It's really a great experience. Yeah. Decentraland.org if you have a moment.
and go to Crypto Valley and find Cash Labs Gallery and go there.
Actually, I found out recently, because of all the Fashion Week press, if you Google Cash Labs Gallery Decentraland, it comes up, which is very nice.
It's very, 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 very good. Okay, and then how do you see, because your role in digital fashion ecosystem, or I should say, in NFT and blockchain ecosystem, is quite interdisciplinary, very creative. You're doing many things. How do you see your role in this ecosystem now, and how do you imagine it evolving in the next years?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I see myself kind of integrating in a few different ways. So anytime I talk to new clients or new people that I'm kind of introducing myself to, I always say there's me and there's my company. So Cash Labs is an entity that I'm very much, as I mentioned before, is my baby. It's very much something that I'm working on growing right now, and building, as everybody says in the space. Cash Labs is an agency that helps bring Web3 projects to market. I've had the pleasure of working on a bunch of projects on a whole bunch of different levels over the past few years. And there's a bunch of learnings I've kind of gotten from all of those experiences. And I do believe that most, and I do mean most because every project is unique, but most NFT projects are in some way formulaic, and they're not all the same, but there are categories that we can, kind of put projects in. There's processes that I've created basically to help take these types of projects to market. I do think that these processes are highly dependent on the project being a good project inherently. But since we have the pleasure of choosing a lot of our clients, we kind of have these systems that we're bringing people down. So a big part of how I'm working in the space is through my company and helping bring a lot of projects to market. Some of them from scratch, for instance, like Estee Lauder came to us before Fashion Week and just said, help us, create an experience, propose something, and help us produce it. So, we can be full service, and we've done that. But most of the time, we're helping create narratives. We're helping, create campaigns. We're really telling stories and creating user experiences, which are the things that I personally really enjoy doing. Beyond my company, myself personally, I'll take on a few specific roles. I'll take on the role of advisor for some companies. I'll take on the role of curator for some companies, as you've seen. I'll speak, I'll lecture. But for the most part, what I really love doing is high-level creative ideation and strategy. So, high-level PR, high-level campaign development, strategy from square one of a project. Like, these are the things that personally really excite me. And beyond that, I think another one of the reasons that I think that Cash Labs and by extension myself have been successful thus far in the space is because it's kind of funny when I say it this way, but it's almost our like Canadian attitude. I do have a very much an affinity to help people. I want to see this space grow genuinely. So thereby I really want to connect people. So a lot of my friends will kind of consider me like the glue between them and a lot of other people in the space, because, you know, I'll make the initial connection and I'll make sure that those connections thrive, because, there are a lot of people working in this space, I believe, within silos, you know, very independently, because this is such a decentralized ecosystem. Like, we are so global, and so many of us either work alone or in a very small group, almost in a vacuum. And I think it's really important to facilitate connections between people who can help each other. And a lot of the time, some of the best projects that I get to work on end up being, you know, really synergistic relationships between my clients and between my friends ultimately. And those are the projects that I end up having the most fun on, because, you know, I'm working with two separate parties who are both, you know, engaging me separately, and we're essentially all working together doing something that we're all genuinely really enjoying. So I think that the scope of my work has definitely changed over the past, you know, let's say decade. I ran a production company for 7 years. I've definitely paid my dues. I've done every job from like a stylist to hair and makeup to you know, line producer to art director to, you know, having to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and carry a fridge up a flight of stairs. You name it, I've probably done it in the space. But yeah, I think that now, as I said, I'm really personally focused on creative ideation and seeing what we can do differently. Since we're still at the bleeding edge, we always have to figure out how can we innovate further and what can we do differently.
Yeah, and speaking, that's great. I love what you said about, you know, bringing people together and working with clients, working with people who are your friends. I think that's very valuable, and I always really appreciate that. And I think, you know, there's really a lot of value and strength in doing that. I really don't like when you have those friends, you know, who have like one group of friends and another, and they kind of try to have different identities and keep them all apart. I'm always very suspicious of that. But
yeah, like, you can't meet my other group of friends.
Yeah, like you're not allowed. These are my work colleagues.
Actually, I will say, like, not to interrupt you, but I will say one of my favorite things have always been bringing disparate groups of people together. I think that's maybe one of the reasons I really enjoy like NFT onboarding and Metaverse onboarding, because it's not shock value, but it's bringing something to people that they otherwise would have never heard of, which I think inherently is exciting. But even back in my production days, I remember in music videos and commercials, I would try to do things like bring together like straight male rappers and drag queens and just put them in the same room and put on music and like put, you know, have a music video scene play and just ask them to dance. And just like, I want to see genuine human interactions with people who wouldn't typically, you know, come together. And I think that's also part of the job of a curator as well. You know, when we're creating a show, how can we bring together disparate ideas that actually do work together? So anyway, coming back to the original point, that's also you know, a cool thought, and something that I'm also really excited by. And I think that if you can get that kind of excitement by doing these kinds of things, that bodes well for your you know, ability to turn that kind of thing into a career.
Yeah, definitely. But you use the word onboarding, and that people not normally like, you know, do those things. So let's go there. Let's talk a little bit about how this podcast is called. So it's called Fashion Knowledge. So, you know, NFT, blockchain, there's a lot of knowledge to be redistributed, shared, and also produced still in that space.
Totally.
So how do you, because now it's still a very bipolar kind of environment. Either it's dramatic no, or it's a rather dramatic yes. It's either hyper ecstatic or super dystopian. So like, how do you, I don't know, in general, how do you approach it in the beginning? Because obviously you mostly are, you know, in touch with people and in proximity to people who are very curious or excited about it. But how do you kind of onboard people, as you said? And also, what do you think, you know, we should all learn more about in that space?
No, it's a very good question. I think that just given the context of this podcast, considering that it's a fashion knowledge podcast, I think I'll mention one thing. I made my first NFT in 2019, but I didn't understand what it was, if I'm being perfectly honest. I went through the steps, but I didn't really understand the fundamentals of, you know, the ecosystem. It was 2020. I was listening to one of the early Clubhouses, and this was back when Clubhouse, I've mentioned this before, but this was back when Clubhouse had, you know, a bunch of people who would otherwise never be there. Like now they would never be there, you know, directors of companies, celebrities, you know, it was just a very invite-only, very small group of people, and I happened to have gotten an invite for a friend on my birthday. So I was listening to a room, and there was like some director from Marc Jacobs, some director from like Ferragamo, like a whole bunch of fashion people were in this room, and they were talking about NFTs, and they were talking about, you know, just simply the idea that if you're selling a high value item, a real item, a purse, a watch, a necklace, right now that item is going to come with a ton of means of certification inherently. It's going to come with a physical certificate. You're going to get a membership card, some plastic card. You're going to get added some database. They're going to send you emails. There's a whole bunch of things that come with that card, that item. And they were just saying that NFTs essentially encapsulate all of those things and store the data of your purchase on the blockchain. So without you having to, carry around a Prada membership card and your 12-page, physical certificate and the box it came in and the original receipt and all of these things, you can just have a digital certificate of what you bought. And that was kind of the aha moment for me, because I was like, oh, wow, that's so much easier. Because I'm a pragmatist. I always think, if something's easier, I definitely think people are going to adopt it, because we're lazy. People are really lazy. Like, I love Uber Eats. I hate going grocery shopping because I'm really busy. And it works for me. I don't necessarily encourage that for everybody listening, but it works for me.
Not a sponsored,
but yeah, it's not a sponsored from Uber Eats, exactly. But yeah, I think when we're talking about the virtual space and NFTs in the metaverse, I think it's really a matter of ease and addition. So one thing I also like to say in this conversation, so that for me was the first thing that made sense for NFTs. Also, one thing I'll mention before I go on my one little tangent, beyond that, I think NFTs, once you understand them as a technology and not as a sensational idea, I think they become a lot less scary. And when we consider that virtual wearables are NFTs, virtual land are NFTs, access to a lot of the DAOs and communities that I'm a part of are NFTs, and a lot of the art I own are NFTs. NFTs are really, it's a lot less of a static system than many people think. And anything can be an NFT. It's essentially just information stored on the blockchain instead of stored on a server, as we would have on the internet. And thereby it's much more secure, and we're able to transact it financially and between each other. When we talk about the metaverse, and this is the thing that, when we're talking about first timers or people who may not be within the conversation right now, sometimes I have, like my parents' friends or people who I'll mention the metaverse or something, and they have this immediate reaction, kind of a very protective reaction, I believe. That's, I don't want my kids in the metaverse. It's going to take them away from their lives. It's going to detract from their lives. It's going to suck them further into the screens that we're already on, all day long on our phones. It's already a conundrum. But what I think is the opposite. I believe that, metaverse platforms and virtual experiences are additive functions to our lives. I believe that, the way that we should look at virtual experiences, we should look at them as what can we add to our lives that we otherwise could not do in our immediate confines of physical reality. When we think on a sensational level, it could be like flying or, being able to, let's think about Decentraland Pride happening right now. There's a Pride parade that's running for 30 days straight. If that happened in real life, everybody would be dead. It wouldn't be possible. But also, let's think on a more practical level, right? If I'm a young trans person living in Saudi Arabia and I don't feel comfortable going outside, as my authentic self, maybe in the metaverse I can feel comfortable in my avatar skin. If I'm somebody who is gay and living in a very remote village where maybe I'm the only person who identifies that way in my immediate circle, or you don't have anybody to talk to about it, you can now go online and have interactions with people. And I'm sure there are many, many more use cases beyond, those are to my immediate experience. But I think that it's really, the doors are definitely open. And the last thing I'll say on that point is I think that it's wise that we embrace the technology at its early stages now, in terms of, becoming accustomed to virtual spaces, virtual worlds, artificial reality, Snapchat filters, Instagram filters, etc. Because in our very immediate future, so from my perspective, within the next 5 or 10 years, we are going to move into an extended reality future where we will wear glasses, that thereby, extend our virtual worlds into our physical environments. And we will be able to do things like, touch the air and turn down the temperature in the room, or swipe up and order food without having to take out our phone. And to going back, just last thing I want to say on that point, going back to the point of let's say the concerned mother who's worried about their child spending all of their time in their phone, that's the solution. And it's a little bit long term, but that's the solution. Eventually, I think we're going to move from here to out here. And I think that's when, this digital realm will seem a lot less dystopic. But anyway, that's my soapbox.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So basically, kind of getting rid of the screen and going beyond the screen as a kind of next progression solution. This is something that yeah, we also one of guests of our podcast. I think it was episode 9, I believe. Kostas Kazantzis, he was also kind of talking about it from more like a creative technologist, experiential perspective. But yeah, similar kind of long-term goal. I'm curious to see it. On my end, I see more of a either to the forest or to the screen kind of attitude. So either we kind of have this like eco core, loving the village countryside lifestyle, or people are interested in metaverse, blockchain, and technology. But like, I really don't think it's neither nor. I was at the Global Fashion Summit this week, and one super sweet guy who's specializing in fashion sustainability and very interested in consumer behavior, he said, I know nothing about sustainability and digital fashion and NFTs, all of that. And he said, do you think it's bad? Like, in a way, do you think it's ignorant? I said, no, I think you're just delaying the process, because as you work in the space, it's just like you're putting it on hold and you're just going to do it. You're just going to learn about it, but just a little bit later. So I think I don't think it's ignorance, because sometimes we don't always have to be up to date with what's happening now or about to come. If everybody would do that, we'd pretty much for society impossible. But anyway, I would like to ask you, this is pretty much my last question. So this is the perspective you're sharing with others, this is your take on it, but what would you like to learn more about? Like, what do you feel like it would be amazing to, because you're so aware of the space, you know so many different perspectives. What you would like to learn more about?
I mean, I think that our jobs, as being operators in this space are constantly learning and constantly developing. I mean, we're really dealing with complete bleeding edge technology. Every few months I kind of have the, should I go back and do a PhD? Should I go back and do a PhD? Conversation in my mind, just because there's so much information available. I think that, I'm writing a book right now. I'm definitely working on that. And in that process, I'm still always learning. It's called the Web3 Bible. I'm looking at it as very much like a guide, like Hitchhiker's Guide to Web3, and to delve in, to all of these topics that we're talking about today. But, in that process, I really do, I value two things. Obviously, I value, traditional, let's say, knowledge. So I think that, delving in deeper into technologies and understanding things further within the realms of haptics, and how can we bring, how can we further blend the realms of digital and physical from a production standpoint. I'm always very interested in that, and I'm working with some really incredible people in Los Angeles, people like Peter Martin and Krista Kim, who are like pushing things forwards, I think, in the realm of, digital humans and pairings and things like that. And I'm very excited. Also, in terms of how that applies to education, I'm very excited about that. But also, I think on I lost my train of thought, and I had a good second thing I was going to say, but let me see if I can rewind and remember. Yes, I do remember the other thing I was going to say. So pretending like I didn't say anything there. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing I think I'm really interested in is actually user experiences and learning from people who are interacting in this environment. Because I think when we're considering onboarding people, when we're considering people coming into this world, even those of us who have been in this space for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, we have a huge advantage over others. And I don't want to say that in a kind of elitist way, but, we have a lot of information already, and a lot of things are common knowledge to us, as we've talked about, that other people may be completely unaware of. And it's almost it's almost a different level of ignorance, where this is obvious to us. I think once you've taken the blue pill and gotten into the, the Web3 decentralization mindset, it does almost seem obvious, a lot of the things that we're talking about. But that being said, I do think that hearing people and hearing about their first experiences doing things like entering the metaverse or buying an NFT, and seeing how you can talk to those people and how you can improve those user experiences are really important to me. And I think in terms of what I can learn, I think the biggest thing I can learn is how many people can I interface with and talk to, and figure out what their perspective is on this whole thing, and then use that information to hopefully help continue to push the space forwards.
Yeah, great. That's excellent. I think it's a very big, important topic. How to distribute knowledge about it, and then also how to basically make everything more accessible, more equitable, and also how to learn from our collective experiences to grow farther. And I think here, the user experience is incredibly important. And also another thing that is good to think about, how it will really impact us, how does it change us? Because being in Web3 or going into Metaverse, I'm not saying that I would use those words interchangeably, but this is how we, refer them
It's the
right
same
now.
it's the same ecosystem is what I like to say.
The same
Yeah.
ecosystem, exactly.
Yeah.
They will impact our cognition. They will impact our bodies, the way we think, the way we perceive things. I think it's like a gold mine for scientists of different sorts to examine those things to dig deeper. So I'm very excited
I mean,
to see
I can't
more
wait
of
to
that.
decentralize industries like what you just mentioned, like science and research and
Yeah.
education. I mean,
Yeah.
imagine if you're a PhD student or a master's student, you can now hypothetically get a lecture on a VR headset or, through a hologram from somebody in anywhere in the world. And that's already very exciting, just that in and of itself, anything
Yeah.
that we can do to further break down our borders, I think is incredibly progressive in terms of
Yes.
technology
Any
moving us
kind of
forwards.
borders.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's break the borders. I think this is a good ending to our conversation. David, thank you so
Fabulous.
much for talking to me. It was a pleasure. I think we could go on for another 30 minutes, but let's stop here.
At least. Thank you so much for having me. It's always
Thank
a
you so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you so much.